Okay. Hi, Rob. So shall we discuss the topic of power and ethics? And why
Mm.
is it that in the risk and safety world, these two topics are very rarely explicitly mentioned? And why
Yeah,
is it important to think about these things and talk about these things, power and ethics? Let's just talk about that.
I think that's a very good observation. I, I mean, there has to be a reason why people are silent about various things, and you can make people very powerful by being silent. When I worked in child protection, and when I worked in welfare services, and when I worked in areas of child abuse and things like that, um, and I did that for a number of years, silence was the power of the powerful. They thrived on silence. So, for example, um, if you've abused a child, let's say you're a Catholic priest, and if you've abused a child, it's in your best interest to keep that child silent. And even when that child speaks up, then that child gets discredited as a liar and making up stories. But my point is this: as long as you remain silent on critical issues, it allows unethical practice to thrive. As long as you don't have transparency in your workplace, it allows power or the powerful to thrive. And one of the things I like about the IQ engagement board and the IQ process is it is an action of transparency that's shared amongst a group of people. Now, when a safety person is the exclusive container of the audit, and the safety person has the exclusive knowledge of the regulation and has exclusive knowledge of the work practice, then they are able to hoard power to themselves and then use that power to abuse employees in the name of good. I'm only doing this to you because this is good for you. I'm saving lives, right? So I think the silence by the safety industry on the issue of power is profoundly important. And,
So
and
moving on to the next question now, which is Rob, that yes, you talk about silence and how important it is to understand
yes,
silence
yes,
when it comes to issues of power and ethics. My
yes,
question really is then, what is? Let's just talk about what is power and ethics. What does it really mean in the context of risk and safety?
okay. Can I
Because you
just
can
make
only, the reason why I ask this question is that you can only start to understand what is silent when you know what is silent.
yes. First of all, let me say this. The secret things and the unconscious things are given power when they're unseen. When they're made conscious and they're made transparent, you actually disempower that power, which is why in IQ listening, our goal is to make the unconscious conscious.
Mhm.
That's why we do it. That's the purpose of IQ, visual verbal learning. We make the unconscious conscious. And you can only make the unconscious conscious through conversational, listening, mapping, verbal, etc. Right? One of the things which helps sustain this power and to keep it secret is never talking about it, which is why the risk and safety industry, there is no, if you do a safety degree or a diploma in Australia or a master's degree, you do not study ethics and you do not study power. If you're in Australia and you do an undergraduate degree in law, your very first subject on the very first day is ethics and power. It's the very first thing you study. Same if you're in other professions like teaching or nursing or medicine. But in risk and safety, There is nothing in a lot of this bullying and this stuff is kept in silence, in secret, and people don't even realize that they're being abused, that they're being victimized, or in fact they're being racially impugned, or anything that happens, and so because it's
Right. So here's a question then I asked you earlier, which is, what is the nature of power? How do we talk about power? How do we understand ethics and power? I think
okay.
that's
Well,
very important.
Okay, so why don't you and I do a little bit of a map
Yes, I think that would be good.
outside of this? So when I say the word power, or you hear the word power, what do you think of?
Abuse,
Abuse. Yeah. What else?
hierarchy.
Hierarchy. Okay, I'm going to put that out here. Hierarchy. Right.
Justice.
Justice. Wow. I don't associate power with justice, but I'll put it in.
Yes, I'll tell you why I think so. It came from the idea of hierarchy, actually, because the notion of hierarchy misses the point that sometimes you need hierarchy for order, for social order in the society.
Yeah.
And through social order. So, for example, you are a parent and you have 3 children in the house and they're all having a meal together.
Yeah.
So it is your role as your parent who is higher in the order to ensure that all 3 of them share the meal. So in that sense, there is a sense of justice and order there in hierarchy through power.
Okay, I think that when I think of the word justice, I think it's in a dialectic with the word love. If it's disconnected from love, then it's not justice.
So this is the point, that you love all 3 children equally, and you want to make sure that all 3 of them get a meal.
Okay, so the outcome for me is not okay. The outcome for me is not justice. But let's move on. I'm going to. You've put in 3 words. I'm going to put in 1.
Sure.
The word for power in Greek is dunamis.
Yes.
Right. The word dunamis is where we get the word dynamic or dynamite from.
That's right.
And it's explosive power, right? Yet I also think, when I think of justice and power, I think of the opposite of explosive power, and I think of the power of humility. Right?
That's right.
Very, 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 very different way of understanding power. So, for example, you could have the power of, say, someone like Donald Trump, or you could have the power of Mahatma Gandhi. You could have the power of Nelson Mandela, or you could have the power of Vladimir Putin. And I think there's a fascinating dialectic here, because I don't think people in risk and safety understand, because they see this humility as weakness. So rather than hand power over to someone else, right, they hoard power to themselves, because that's this dunamis power. This is the power of dynamite. This is explosive power, right? Yeah. But that's not the kind of power that I think of. I think the power of weakness and the power of humility is Nelson Mandela. It's Jesus Christ. It's that kind of power, which is what we should aspire to, not this aspiration to this, because I think what we get through hierarchy, if we join it up, and to this explosive power, it must always go to abuse. It always will go to abuse, because it's full of ego and it's full of self. This is not full of ego and self. That's why I see humility connected to justice through love, right?
We go
What
back
does
to
that
the
say?
silences. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we go back to the secrets. We go back to silences. And what does that do? Silences empower abuse.
Yes. That's a really good point. Yes.
I'm just aware that I'm wearing a T-shirt with the name of perhaps the most famous band in the world. Yep.
That's right. Yes.
And we've got in Australia at the moment a young woman called Taylor Swift. And she's viewed in different ways by different people. If this is your idea of power, then the media are saying about, look how powerful this woman is. She's worth $1 billion. She has audience of 600,000 in Melbourne this week. She favors Biden, so that's now a big problem because Trump's upset that this superstar now favors his opposition and so on. This is all these people writing from here, right? But people who actually know her don't speak of her like that. Yes, she's a smart businesswoman. So it's up to you whether you think this kind of power or this kind of power is what she's on about. But to be honest, it's like the Beatles. They're just musicians. They just creatively write songs. And so two men, Paul McCartney and John Lennon, wrote 300 songs, and their power was in their poetry. The power was in their music, and people followed them. The funny thing is, those who have dynamic power that eventually lead to abuse, when they're shown to be abusive and the transparency finally comes out and the unconscious becomes conscious, they lose all their followers. But when those who are humble move into transparency, they're already there. They don't lose any followers. Mandela loses no followers. Gandhi loses no followers. And so that's the difference.
So how should we think about power and ethics then? Let's just talk about that, because I know you have done quite a lot of work in this space. There
Yes.
are various ways to think about power and authority and ethics.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about that.
Okay. Well, I think this remains silent. Everything that we've spoken about so far, silent. The moment you put ethics or moral philosophy and you make it transparent, this is something that you will do as part of becoming a safety person. So in a diploma or a certificate or a conference, this becomes not secret. This becomes the conversation. We must talk about this or we'll never be professional. If we keep it in the silences and the secret, then we foster power. If we have conversations about ethics, moral philosophy, and make it transparent, then we disempower this. And then the industry becomes more professional.
Yeah.
Less people are sacked because they make a mistake. Less people are blamed for things they don't do. And so, I see all this stuff being published now by by various people, no blame and just culture and all this stuff. All this language about no blame and just culture, at no time do they talk about ethics.
No, they don't.
It's the elephant in the room. Why?
That's right. Perhaps it's good to talk about the context in which all this works so well, which is an organization.
Yes.
What incentives do we have in any organization to discuss issues of power, particularly in the risk and safety sector? Because the way I always visualize risk and safety is as a compliance department, which is meant to empower businesses to maximize profits, to maximize gains, and
Yes.
to portray this symbolic idea that everything is under control.
Yes, that's true.
So the question then becomes, what incentive do we have to discuss these things within the context of an organization?
Not much.
Not much.
When you look at the pay scale of what money we throw at CEOs, we pay them so much money, they begin to think they're gods. They are so far removed from their employees by money that they have separate offices, and they get a better car, and they better get a car park, and they live in a better suburb, and they've got more money, and they send their children to private school. All that stuff works against humility.
Yes, it does.
And so the idea that you could be the CEO of a large organization and be humble is very rare, because there's no mechanism that really fosters that. And we even teach our employees to look up to the hierarchy. We give them a hierarchy, and we look to the top, and we worship the Lord or the God because he's in charge and he's the big guru.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when they fall, they have a mighty fall.
That's right. So I'm thinking now, Rob, that you put people in a moral dilemma here, as a safety person, that this is what you ought to be doing, but this
Yes.
is what you can't do.
Yes.
So that's an interesting dilemma. So where does that leave me with this moral philosophy, with the knowledge of ethics? Where do I stand? And I think like everything in life, that's my view. A good safety professional knows how to strive for a balance, how to
Yes.
create a balance.
Yeah.
I think, and to be equipped with the right philosophy, with the right knowledge of ethics, with the right tools, with the right methods to be able to give their opinion.
Yes.
I think that's what makes the profession so much more meaningful.
Oh, yes, if that was there, but it's not. I see the safety world as this competitive world of egos, all striving to make money, marketing some particular idea against another idea, and another group doing the same thing. All marketing ideas, but none of them are considered ethically. No one's actually looking at these ideas that are thrown onto the market and what it actually does to people in organizations, or even, in fact, whether half this stuff works. Lots of the practices that are being done by risk and safety people simply don't work. They're mythological ideas.
It is. The question, Rob, I'm just as we are speaking, what I'm coming to realize is that there are at least two problems here. One is that people in risk and safety are not educated enough. A lot of them, not all of them, a lot of them are not educated enough to realize the ideas around ethics and moral philosophy. And I think it's in the nature of the organization that such people, even if they do have the right knowledge, they will not be empowered because it goes against the ethos of the organization. And
Correct.
to an extent, I have experienced this ethical dimension, which you will not agree with, is with engineers. I was working with 25 odd engineers who were technically very sound. And there comes a time when these people would raise their hand to say, I don't think this is going in the right direction. And the organization would listen to them sometimes. And they would listen to them only because they have the technical knowledge to prove what they're saying. Basically, they have the knowledge to prove that what the business is doing is not right. It's not going in the right direction. And I think, and let's not get too hung up on the idea of whether it's an engineer or not, or a technical person or not. The point I'm trying to make is this, that I think part of the problem lies with not being able to recognize, not having a common language in the organization. And safety people are, a lot of times they are marginalized. They are kept on one side. And that makes it very, very difficult for them to raise any sort of issues around power and ethics, or the abuse of power.
Yeah, because what we've got over here is the real power of the safety person is you've got, they're the custodians of the regulation, right? They have custody of the regulation and no one else does in the organization. Becomes quite a silo. And this, in fact, is their power. They don't have much more than that, right?
No.
And so all of their training, all of their education is focused on consuming massive amounts of information on the regulation and the collection of data. But nothing, that all remains in a way a secret part of their activity. At no stage do they come up to this position up here and entertain their relationship with the rest of the organization. They're kept in this silo of safety, and that's their power. You know, and often my experience has been that safety competes with other power centers in the organization, such as HR and other parts of the business, the accounting part of the business, and so on. They all start to compete with each other, and so they create these silos. Well, my power is in policing the regulation, and that's where I'm secure. But you're right, I have no language to talk across the disciplines in an organization, and they don't have any skills for it either, because they not only don't have no skills in ethics, they have no skills in communication either. There is no skill development in communication in a safety degree either. So no ethics and no skill development in communication means, how are they going to go to communicate up to, general managers and CEOs about their vision for risk and safety? I've got no idea.
No, and this is a very important point, because in order for a person to raise a concern, they must be credible.
Yes. Yep.
If you're not credible, how is anyone going to trust you? And the credibility comes from, at a very, very basic level, being able to speak a common language.
Yeah, correct. And communicate effectively.
Yes, that's right. So, I actually find a lot of things in SPORE. For example, a simple diagram where you have the trade-offs and byproducts, where hierarchy of risk is seen one way and another way. I'll put that in this video.
You can
Say
invert
that
it.
you can do a risk assessment both ways. You can still use the language that goes from elimination to control to PPE and so on, but you can turn it around and ask a different set of questions. And I think this is the kind of knowledge that is very, very helpful for people to start thinking beyond just the constraints of this binary language. And because if you talk to operational people, if you talk to people in the business world, they don't talk binary language. They are very comfortable talking about the trade-offs and compromises and everything else, because that's what they do all the time. But it's only when it comes to the risk and safety world, we're not used to it. We don't have the competence. We don't feel comfortable to speak that language. So I think that is something that really interests me.
Yes. Well, most of the professions study ethics and power, and that's why people in businesses and organizations who are qualified in things like communication skills, law, education, learning, community work, social work, when those people come into an organization, they're far better educated because they are more aware of their power. I mean, even doctors and nurses who work in hospitals, they know and are more conscious about the power they have, and they know the power they have in relation to the patient, and they actually even have skill development on how to improve their bedside manner, how to compensate for their power. And I've been involved in programs like that, but that involves an awareness that comes with transparency. But there is no transparency. All of this stuff remains in the silence because we don't speak about it. But you can't have an awareness, right, of this unless it's actually put on the agenda, and it's not on the agenda. So you and I are talking about it, but scan the whole safety world, scan all these hundreds of safety people doing a podcast, right? There are hundreds of these people doing safety podcasts. Look for one that discusses ethics and power. Look for one. You won't find it. It doesn't exist.
And then we're back to the same where we started, which is by
Yep.
silencing power and ethics, you're actually amplifying it.
Yeah, correct. The silence amplifies, and in all my experience in community work and in any of the work that works with people and families and communities, silence empowers the abuser.
That's right. Of course it does. And I think, Rob, the question that I want to leave people with is that, and this is a very important one in my view, that just because you have the knowledge of moral philosophy and ethics and how to locate power does not mean that you get so excited today that you start doing it, because that's where things go terribly wrong. That, suddenly people see the light, they know there is a way of doing it, and they go and disrupt the power. And that's where, so there has to be a balance, and there has to be an approach, and I think it comes through awareness. It comes through the right kind of methods and tools, but I think it has to be incremental. It cannot be disruptive.
Oh, no, yeah, yes. I mean, we all the time in sport talk about balance.
That's right.
About
Yes.
the balances between. A lot of people don't hear that. They don't hear that we argue for an ever-moving dialectic between one and the other. The truth of the fact is it's the binary position that's imbalanced. It's when you're prepared to negotiate and have a conversation between the various competing forces, then you'll strike a balance. But if it's all here and there's no conversation with here, then that red line there, that's the line where the balance is. Of course, there are times when you have to assert authority. Of course, there are times when you have to assert humility. But there's a discourse between those two. There's a dialectic between those two. But if you're not talking at all about power and ethics at all, how can you even start the conversation? Well, I remember one of the first things we just studied when I was studying education and learning and becoming a school teacher in the early 70s. The very first thing we were introduced to was what was called child-centric learning. Take the focus off yourself, take the focus off teaching content, and focus on the needs of the child and relinquish power to them so they can direct their learning. And a lot of teachers struggle with that, but at least that issue's on the agenda.
That's right.
That issue's on the agenda. Unfortunately, in risk and safety, it's not on the agenda. It remains a secret. And as long as it remains a secret, I don't think the industry can ever become professional.
Absolutely. And, I just wanted to end with this beautiful thing that, from sport, that I'm listening when I suspend my agenda, I submit control, and I attend to the other. And I have this dynamic between the lion and the mouse here.
The lion and the mouse. And that's going to be in your book. That'll be great.
Yes, that's right. Yes. So it's a great conversation, Rob, as always. Thank you for your time. I will stop the recording.
Yep.
Or do you want to summarize this before we leave? Do you want to?
No, I think it's fine.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Rob.